What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Pistons Daily, where you can find daily content covering all things Detroit Pistons, Monday through Friday. As always, I'm your host. My name is Kyle Garrison. I'm over on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2, where I talk all things Detroit sports. So head over there, give me comments, questions, concerns, episode ideas. I'd love to hear from all you guys. Also, shout out to everyone who tunes in every single day. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way to help support the channel. With that being said, let's jump into a Friday edition of Pistons Daily. So first things first, let's talk about our skill of the day. And that's just going to be Marcus Sasser's offensive scoring upside. So I do think that Marcus Sasser is going to be in a limited role this year, but I do imagine he will be a plug-and-play guy, really just based on matchups. And I do think I'd like to see him in that initial 10-man rotation. I think the Pistons will probably run 9 deep to start things off, but Marcus Sasser could be a guy where you plug him in, again, based on matchups. And if the other team has a smaller point guard or a smaller guard that Marcus Sasser can match up against, then I do think he will get some minutes. And overall, the Pistons need some shooting off of the bench. They really only have Duncan Robinson, who is a high volume shooter. And with the loss of Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley, Sasser's a guy that could step into that role off the bench and he could give you some good minutes. Again, the Pistons didn't have a ton of trust in him at the end of the year. They went out and got Dennis Schroeder at the trade deadline because the Pistons wanted another ball handler that could come off of the bench. And Marcus Sasser really doesn't play that traditional point guard. He's more of an off-ball point guard who has a very high scoring upside. So I think that Marcus Sasser can find his way into the lineup, but he's going to have to continue to stay efficient. And I think last year he did enough to stay on the team, to not be a trade piece, and still get another opportunity to thrive. And I think this year will be a big indicator of what his future looks like in Detroit. But when just looking at his efficiency across the board last year, Marcus Sasser was above average in every single category when it came to efficiency. At the rim, he shot 67%, which was in the 75th percentile for point guards. He shot 47% from mid-range, which was in the 77th percentile, 37% from three, 57th percentile, and he had a 54.4 effective field goal percentage, which was in the 69th percentile for qualified point guards. And I just really like the fact that all across the board, it's not just three-point shooting or it's not just at the rim, but Marcus Sasser, wherever he is scoring, he's going to do it at an efficient clip. And the big question with Marcus Sasser is whether or not he can play solid enough defense and be a secondary ball handler or a secondary playmaker on the court next to Jaden Ivey and Caris Levert and Cade Cunningham, who are going to be your big three when it comes to your guard lineup, with the possibility of Marcus Sasser stepping into that fourth guard that comes off of the bench. Again, like I said, it's going to be a matter of if other parts of his game start to come to light, and it's not just him being an efficient scorer, because that's great and all, and we love that, but there's other parts of his game he does have to work on. And I don't want to water down those numbers because they're very, very impressive, especially from a second-year guard, a smaller point guard at 6'2". So again, I do like the upside there with Marcus Sasser as a scorer, and I'm excited to see what he can do and if he can carve himself out a spot in this lineup going forward. But again, love the scoring upside. It'll just be a matter of just what other parts of his game bring value to this young core and can bring value to this team, because again, he's 25 years old. He's got a lot of potential in this league, and I would like to see him thrive in a Pistons uniform, because if he goes somewhere else and he starts to produce, the Pistons might be kicking themselves. But let me know in the comments or over on Twitter what your thoughts are on Marcus Sasser and if he can be a piece of this rotation going forward. But next topic I wanted to touch on is a Bleacher Report released an article that basically just gave every team's riser and every team's faller heading into the 2025-2026 season. And I just wanted to touch on the riser right now, which was Assar Thompson. So this was written by Grant Hughes over at Bleacher Report, and I'll just read the reasoning behind Assar Thompson being the Pistons' main riser. I just got to find the article real quick. So Hughes writes, Amen Thompson got all the breakout love last year, and his brother is next in line. Assar made legitimate improvements as a sophomore, but he also missed significant time due to injury for the second straight season. If he can avoid a few weeks on the shelf, the hyper-athletic wing will blow away last year's 10.1 points, 5.1 rebounds, and 2.3 assists, which he amassed in only 22.5 minutes per game. Defensively, Thompson is a safe bet to rate among the best at his position. The Pistons will keep him on the floor for major minutes because of his work on that end alone. If his three-point shot ever comes around, we'll be talking about an all-star. And I want to reiterate, 22 and a half minutes per game last year. I think that's the biggest thing that stands out for Assar Thompson. Even if there isn't an insane offensive improvement with his jump shot, the volume and the role that he has on this team is going to be much bigger than last year, and I have no doubt that his numbers are going to increase all across the board. Hughes also mentioned the fact that if his outside shooting comes around, he could be a potential all-star. I think that Assar Thompson has all-star potential without having a jump shot. Especially if he can become a secondary ball handler and a secondary creator at the small forward position. That's very valuable for somebody at his size and his defensive prowess. If he can be a guy that you trust with the ball in his hands, that's going to bring a ton of value to this team going forward. So I really like the fact that people are recognizing that Assar Thompson can have a breakout year this year. But I don't think that it's going to really be predicated on whether or not his jump shot comes around, but rather if just the other parts of his game that he's very, very good at, like attacking downhill, rebounding, finding ways to be a facilitator, and obviously defense, if those parts of his game become even better and are elevated to the next level, and I do think that that can be the case this year, he's got a ton of room for growth. And again, 22 and a half minutes per game last year. He's going to be getting probably around 10 more minutes a night, and I think he can become a 15-plus point per game scorer, dish out 5-plus assists a night, and grab seven rebounds. It's his overall skill set allows for him to really stuff the stat sheet. And if year three Assar, you're looking at a guy who's averaging 15, 7, and 5 with around 3 stocks a night. I mean, you're looking at one of the better players in this league and one of the better young wings that we have in the NBA. And those, he had 2.4 stocks a night last night in 22 and a half minutes. I have no doubt that can get up to 3 stocks, especially just with his nose for the ball. I think the block numbers will probably be around 1 per game, but if he can average 2 steals a night, then there's no doubt in my mind people will be saying he is one of the best defensive players in this league overall. Not just a young defensive player, or not just the best defensive player at his position, but in the NBA as a whole. But I love that Assar Thompson's getting that national media recognition, and after a full offseason of work, I do think that this is going to be his quote-unquote breakout year entering season number 3. But let me know in the comments section down below if you think that Assar Thompson will be the Piston that improves the most this year, or if you think it'll be somebody like Ron Holland, Jaden Ivey, or Jalen Duren. But moving on, let's talk about who Hughes believes is going to be the Pistons' biggest faller. That's Grant Hughes over at Bleacher Report. If you haven't checked out his stuff, go check it out. He does a great job. But his faller for the Pistons this year was Caris Levert, and I'll just read the reasoning why. So Hughes writes, Levert is entering his age 31 season, coming off an outlier effort from deep in 2024 and facing what might be a bit of positional logjam with his new team. Yes, we have to acknowledge Levert is a more established secondary scorer than guys like Jaden Ivey, Ron Holland, and Thompson, but the first two could make up ground on him in a hurry given their youth, while the third will be ahead of Levert in the rotation for defensive reasons. The Pistons should be incentivized to favor all of them over Levert, who is not a potential core piece going forward. And I agree with Hughes here. I understand Caris Levert is 31 years old, and he is probably the biggest candidate to have a bit of a decline in overall production. When you're looking at his stats from last year, they were all across the board. In Cleveland, he shot 41% from 3, but only 50% from 2-point range. When he was traded to Atlanta about halfway through the season, he shot under 34% from 3, but was 60% from inside the arc. So again, his numbers are all over the place, and that's just not this last year. That has been his entire career. He's been very inconsistent, and with a new change of scenery on a new team, a new young Pistons team, who knows what version of Caris Levert we are going to get. So I think it's a very fair evaluation to say that he is the biggest candidate to have a bit of a decline in production for this Pistons team. But either way, if your biggest faller is going to be your 7th or 8th man off the bench, I don't think that's going to give you too much heartburn. I don't think it's the end of the world, considering you really do want Cade and Jaden Ivey running the backcourt a majority of the time. And when the Pistons need to go and it's crunch time and they need to find a way to win a game, you don't want Caris Levert out on the floor. So I'm not too worried about the fact that he could have a fall off. Again, I do think that he's going to be very solid for the Pistons. I think playing with JB Bickerstaff is going to help him once again. But really, I mean, you look at teams like the Warriors and the Clippers, and a lot of their best players are all over 35, and they're expected to try and lead their teams to championships right now. The Pistons are in a much better spot. You don't really need Caris Levert to come in and be a 20-point per game scorer. If he gives you 11 points per game off of the bench on, 45, 36 splits, I mean, you're going to be very happy with that. He's not going to be a guy that's getting over 30 minutes a game. I'd imagine he's going to be anywhere from 20 to 26 minutes a night. Just going to be a good secondary ball handler, a good veteran presence in the locker room. And again, if he gives you productivity off the bench as a two-way combo guard, it's just an added bonus to a young core that is poised for a big year. Because again, you've got guys like Ron Holland and Isaiah Stewart, in addition of Duncan Robinson, who are also guys that are going to come off of the bench. So I don't think you're too worried if Caris Levert takes a little bit of a dip. But let me know in the comments if you do think that Caris Levert will have a decline in production, or if you think that he still has his best basketball in front of him going forward and on this Pistons team. But moving on, before we wrap things up here, I wanted to talk about another Bleacher Report article that I thought was pretty interesting. And this one was written by Greg Schwartz. And he just wrote an article ranking every NBA team's starting lineup entering the 2025 season. And he had the Pistons right at the middle of the pack at 15. So I'll just read the reasoning behind that. So the projected starters: Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Assar Thompson, Tobias Harris, Jalen Duren. And he writes, losing Tim Hardaway Jr. in free agency opens up a starting wing spot for the Detroit Pistons, as the new projected group only logged 3 total possessions together last season. On paper, this is a typo. Sorry. On paper, these expected starters look pretty good, especially with 4 members all making leaps by the year, with an established alpha in Cunningham pulling the strings. Having 2 bad/non-shooters with Thompson and Duren could also cause some problems. However, and Harris is entering year 15. There's some questions to be answered, but there's a ton of upside here, especially if Thompson even becomes an average-ish outside shooter. And I definitely understand the concern. I think that having a starting 5 that has really not played together whatsoever can, give you some heartburn, and there's going to be some growing pains. But by the end of the year, if this starting 5 stays healthy, they're able to play together, they're able to put together a 70-plus game sample size of them on the floor at the same time, we'll be looking at a top 10 starting 5 in the entire NBA, and I'm pretty confident in that. I think that this starting 5 has a ton of upside. They've got their young players, they've got their young star in Cade Cunningham, they've got a couple guys who you're trying to have them take that next leap. They've got a proven veteran in Tobias Harris who's going to do the right things. He's going to do what he's asked to do at a very high level. And I do think that this starting 5 is borderline elite, just alone having a guy like Cade Cunningham. And those other 4 starters are really solid as well. And I think that they're pretty much set in stone. I think that starting 5 is going to be what we look at rolling out into this season. And if what we've heard from Trajan Langdon and JB Bickerstaff and the rest of this team about this offseason, that they're all together and that they're working together and they're kind of figuring out ways to complement each other's game the best they can, then I don't think we're too worried about a starting 5 that didn't play together very much. Because again, if they've built that camaraderie, behind the scenes, then again, it's not going to be too big of a deal if you're heading into the season not having a ton of minutes logged as a starting 5 or as a group. Because a lot of these teams in the NBA have starting 5s where they have not played together, and there's going to be new pieces and new additions. This starting 5 has really all been homegrown, and it's a lot of guys who played together last year. Yeah, you add in Jaden Ivey and Assar Thompson, and kind of that, added question of whether or not they can play together. But the rest of that starting 4 last year with Jaden Ivey out played together. They got experience with one another, and you're pretty much replacing Jaden Ivey with Tim Hardaway Jr., which in a lot of ways is a big upgrade. So I'm very excited to see what this starting 5 can do. And I think if they want to get into that top 10 and that upper echelon of starting fives in the entire NBA, three things need to happen. One being Jaden Ivey becomes a high volume, high efficiency outside shooter. If we see what we saw last year, where he's shooting at a 40% clip from three on high volume, then I don't think that you're too worried about the non-shooter minutes with Jalen Duren and Assar Thompson together. But again, that's going to remain to be seen if Jaden Ivey can get back to that form. I do think that he can. Well, again, we'll just have to see. And then number two, I think Tobias Harris needs to continue to play at the same level as last year. If you see a big decline in his overall production, that's going to be a problem for the Pistons because they leaned on him a lot last year in the playoffs. His defense was incredible. I saw some comments from people saying that Tobias wasn't good last year and the only thing he brought was good defense in the playoffs. And yeah, he wasn't great. He wasn't insane. He was 32 years old, but he pretty much won you 2 playoff games with his defense on Karl Anthony Towns. He was unbelievable, and there's nobody else that could have played Cat the way that Tobias Harris did last year. The physicality, knocking him off of his spot. We saw what happened when Karl Anthony Towns was guarded by Jalen Duren. Do people not remember that? Is this just revisionist history? But again, Tobias Harris is still playing at a very high level, and if you don't think that he should be on this team just because he's old and doesn't fit the timeline, then you clearly didn't watch the games last year, so you should probably reevaluate that before you make some comments like that. But I don't mean to get too mad or whatever. But again, Tobias Harris is still a very, very solid basketball player, and I think that he's got a lot of good basketball left in him, especially for a team that loves him. He's embodied the city of Detroit. He's been here for multiple years now. Last year was his first year since around 2017, but he wants to be here. He wants to be a part of his young core, and I do think that he's going to put together a similar season as he did last year, maybe a little bit of decrease in just overall minutes and overall role on this team, but I do think that he's going to be a starter once again, and he's going to be playing solid minutes. So we better get used to it now. If you have problems with that, then it's going to be a long season for you, because I do think Tobias is going to play a lot of minutes. And then number three, I just think that Jalen Duren needs to become an above league average defender. I don't think that's a hot take whatsoever. He has to get better. There was some times last year where he was pretty much unplayable because of his defensive liabilities, especially when Assar Thompson's not on the floor. There's times where he looks lost out there. His help defense is horrible. He can't be a solid rim protector at times, and I'd like to see that become a priority for him. I'd like to see him hone in on that and really make that a priority to improve on that. And it's an extension year for him. So I think that there's parts of his game that he realizes he has to work on. We saw him working on that mid-range jump shot in the offseason as well. So clearly he knows that he is due for a huge extension, and whether or not that's $20 million a year or $30 million a year, it's all going to be dependent on what strides he takes this season. But again, none of these things are out of the realm of possibility. The three things I mentioned. Jaden Ivey can become a very good shooter. We saw it last year. Tobias Harris can play at that same level because, again, his play style is, reliant on, or not reliant, but his play style thrives in a slow play and an older body because, again, he's very good at isolating his defender. He's very good at slow playing his defender, backing him down, lulling him to sleep, and that's a big thing for a guy who is 33 years old. And again, I mentioned Jalen Duren's due for an extension. So is Jaden Ivey. So those 3-point numbers, he's going to want to continue to improve on because that's going to get him paid more. And I just do think that all three things I mentioned are very possible. And we're going to be talking about the Pistons as a top 10 starting five after this next season. But let me know in the comments or over on Twitter if you agree with the Pistons starting five being ranked 15th in the league, if it's too high or too low, and just overall how you see this team breaking into that top 10, what needs to happen, and who needs to step up. But that's all I've got for you guys today on a Friday edition of Pistons Daily. As always, like, subscribe, comment, turn on post notifications, and follow me on Twitter at Kyle Garrison 2. Also, head over to Spotify, leave a 5-star review and a follow if you can. Once again, thank you all so much for tuning in every single day. With that being said, that is going to do it here for our 50th episode of Pistons Daily, and I will catch you all next time.